Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader. We're going to look today at recent sales, and I believe these are all auctions for vintage mint on cards, couple of 12-inch figures sold that we're going to cover, but really everything else is vintage Kenner mint on cards. Lots of 48 backs with the free Revenge of the Jedi offer. That's one of my favorite card backs, and it always works that way. When I'm trying to not spend any money, then all of a sudden on eBay, stuff comes up that I really want. But I've held back. It is now November 4th. The last item I purchased was September 5th. So it's been almost 2 months since I've bought any Star Wars stuff. That's almost a record. I think the longest record for me is actually 4 months. So we'll see if I last that long. Probably not. Let's be honest here. Probably not. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. So here are those 12-inch figures. These were sold by Gold Star Tech, who we cover all the time. Basically an unlimited, it's like they have a time machine. They've got a DeLorean that takes them back to 1977, and they pick up all these awesome items. So these were all mint in sealed box, both of these 12-inch figures. The first was the Stormtrooper, very, very clean. I mean, that one would grade very well, I think. I mean, it's a very nice example. And that one sold for $761. These are really good candidates for grading. If you happen to be the person that bought either one of these, I would definitely send these in to be graded, because there's a huge price delta between something like this ungraded versus if you get the 80 grade or 85 grade. This, I think, would get an 80 pretty easily. And the price difference is so drastic when you look at the sales prices for AFA graded examples. So the Stormtrooper sold for $761, and then Han Solo, which was also very clean. I mean, that's a, hard. I don't see any flap fold at all on that one. I mean, that is a super clean example. I think that easily gets an 80 as well. Just some light scuffs on the top of the box. That one sold for $660. So, I mean, those are very good deals. The tricky part with the 12-inch line is the window. The window where you can see the figure, because sometimes the glue that holds that window together comes undone, and then it kind of like flops out a little bit, and that really hurts the grade, because that's one of the subscores. They got the box subscore, the figure subscore, and then the W is window. And if that window is kind of fallen off or kind of partially peeled off, it automatically drops it down to like a 60 or a 70. So it's a little trickier to grade these than a typical mint on card, or even like a boxed vehicle, things like that, just because of that window. But if they are as good as they look, I mean, these look very, very nice, then I think that both of those pretty easily get an 80 grade, if not higher. So $660 on that one was a good deal. On to the 48 backs. So this one was the 48 back B. And there's a 48C, which I'm sure we'll cover in a second. But the 48B just has the sticker on the back with the free Admiral Akbar mail-away Revenge of the Jedi. And then the front is also a sticker. The 48C switched over to printed offers on the front, printed offers on the back. So this is the 48B IG88. The only negative on this one was in the upper right-hand corner, you can see where they tried to take off the sticker, the price sticker. Don't do that. It leaves a litho tear, and if they just left the sticker, this thing would probably grade pretty well. It does have a crease above the hang tab. Blister, though, is in really good shape. This would have easily gotten, I don't know, maybe not. I didn't see this crease right here. You can see a crease going up the card. This is probably a 75. 75 at best. But I think it's still a really nice one, though. And IG88 on this card back, I don't know why. It's all of the bounty hunters on the Revenge of the Jedi offers look really good. I know Brett on Fett, fellow YouTuber, is trying to collect all of these. And I know he's got Dengar and Bosk, which I still need. Hint. He's got Dengar, Bosk. I think he's got Zuckuss. I don't know what else he's got, but you'll have to watch his channel to find out. But he might already have the IG88. But this was a nice one. It sold for $425. In an AFA 80, for example, it's probably pretty close to $700 or $800 would be my guess. That's a very tough one to find. Very nice, though. And speaking of bounty hunters, here's the Forlom. We talk about this one all the time. This is the poor man's debut card. The 48A offer list is really the debut card for Forlom, but there's like 2 in existence that people know of. So most people consider this one the poor man's debut. It's like the Bosk with the 32 back B versus the 31A. Very similar situation. Although I think for the Forlom, there's actually less of the 48As than there are of the Bosk 31As. So the 31A, I think, for the Bosk is like maybe less than 20. But for Forlam, according to Jeff E., who has one of the best collections in the world, he was saying that there's like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, something like that, of the Forlam 48 back A. So very tough to find. So this one, let's see, this one is the 48C. So, you know, just to compare it versus the IG88, this is a printed offer on the back instead of having the sticker on the back. It was yellowed, you know, so it kept the price down a little bit, but even with the yellowing, it still sold at $510, which you could make an argument that that's a pretty good price for the seller. We saw recently there was a clear blister that was in pretty similar condition. It might have even been graded already. I can't remember, and it was like $660 thereabouts, and that was the lowest price I've seen on a clear blister. But this one, you know, it had a pretty pronounced ding on the top of the blister and still sold at $510, which I was a little surprised by. I thought this one would stay in the $350 to $400 range. I'm not dogging anyone who buys these, and that's true for all my videos. I'm not dogging you if you paid $510. Goodness knows I've overpaid myself, but in my opinion, I'm just giving you my honest opinion. I think that if you're patient, probably get it for a little cheaper than $510, although it's not a terrible overpay by any means. Chewbacca is another one that you don't see very regularly on this card back. This one is also the 48C. That one sold for $560, which I thought was actually a really good deal. The card looks super clean. It was a punched example, but the clear blister, really nice shape. $560 to me feels like a highway robbery for this one, because I think this one gets the 80 grade pretty easily. It did have some sticker residue in the upper right there, so maybe that holds it back a little bit. Maybe you call it a 75 for the card score, but I think given the condition of the blister and the figure in the back of the card looks good, I still think it might, I think it would pretty easily get an 80 grade overall, even despite that residue on the front of the card. Imperial TIE Fighter palette, this is one I do have in my collection. It has slight crease by the ages 4 and up in the top right, but otherwise very clean. That one sold for $396. That's a pretty good price there. I think I paid $375 for mine ungraded, and it did come back with the 80. It might be an 85. I can't remember. But $396. I mean, that was several years ago, and this one sold at $396. I think that's a very fair price. R2-D2 is another one on this card back that is usually very expensive. This is the sensor scope, obviously. This was the 48C. That one sold for $565. Again, I think that's pretty fair. You know, it's not by any means perfect, but it's unpunched, no price sticker, the blister, stem looks good, everything. So, you know, you could make an argument that that's worth every penny of that price, assuming that one probably gets an 80 grade as well. Next up, we've got a 41 back Luke X-Wing from the same seller. A little bit of damage by the hang tab, but a very clean example. Probably, I think this one would get a 75 plus. I do, because, you know, it's tough because it's on the borderline, but I think when you have structural issues, like true kind of almost tears like you see on the hang tab there, and then on the back, you can see a lot of edge wear around the edges there. And this is on the border. This is on the border between an 80 and a 75 plus, in my opinion. I tend to think it gets a 75 plus. It just depends on who's grading it too. I think CAS, it probably gets the 80. AFA probably gets 75 plus, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it ekes out an 80 either way. But that's a very nice example for $440. Good price there. Bespin security guard sold for $260. This was the 47 back. Obviously a yellowed blister and not as desirable of a character, so that tends to hold the price back. Probably a 75 plus or a low 80 on that one. Stormtrooper on the Return of the Jedi car back, if you see those with a clear blister, they do tend to command a pretty good number. You know, the 65 back A's and B's, most of those, maybe not most, but a lot of those do tend to stay clear blister. It's really after the 65 backs is when the yellowing started to be more pronounced, like with 77s and on. But that Stormtrooper is very nice. That's a very nice example for $530. Luke Skywalker, this was a 65 back. This is a 65 back B. So, you know, again, the 65 backs, they don't always yellow. And you could make an argument that it's not that hard to find ones that aren't yellowed. But I don't know what it is about Luke's Farm Boys on the Return of the Jedi card backs. Those do tend to yellow almost on every one of them. Except maybe the 48 backs with the 9 offer. But that's a very rare card back for this particular character. That one sold for $10.25. I mean, that to me seems like a good deal. It's on that same borderline, 75 plus or 80 grade with the edge wear there, but a very nice example. IG-88 on the Return of the Jedi card back is another one that I kind of been wanting. And I've bid on a few over the years, and I've just never won one. But that's going to be on my goal list for next year, I think. And 306, I think, is a good price on this one. This was clear blister, unpunched. It did have a little, shadow or some sticker residue. If you happen to be the person that bought that, make sure you hold a black light next to that corner to make sure that that doesn't have ink touch-up. Very possibly could. To me, it feels like it's probably just residue. But if you happen to be the one that bought it, hold a black light to it or get a black light app for your phone and see if that's, make sure that's not ink touch-up, because this seller has done that. But, maybe not purposely, but the seller has listed items in the past that have had ink touch-up. But if I can find a really high-grade Return of the Jedi IG-88 next year, that's on my short list. So I'd like to get that. Next up is a Zuckuss, again a clear blister. This was a 65 back A. Very nice example. That one sold for $300. And then Ugnaughts, another one that is tough to get clear blister on the Return of the Jedi card. Obviously, this one had some issues. I don't know what's going on the top left there. It looks like someone got too excited and left a little present on it. But that one sold for $260. Otherwise clean. Maybe that comes off with some lighter fluid or something, but it's a weird stain on the front of it. $260 though. It's probably worth a roll of the dice though at that price. Here was an AFA 80 yellowed blister 77 back A with the coin offer for Darth Vader, just light yellowing to it. And that one sold for $455, which I thought was a pretty good deal. I mean, it seems like most Darth Vaders with light yellowing tend to sell for a big number. And Hakes had one earlier this year that was in very similar condition, very slightly yellow, and it sold for a lot more than $455. I can tell you that. So, and it's always, anytime I see a coin offer, I was intrigued by it because, it's just one of those kind of weird offers that you don't see pop up that often. So I thought that was a pretty good deal at $455. I would have liked to have had that, to be honest with you. Next up was a Power Droid. This was the 77 back B with the Anakin offer, obviously yellowed blister, $246.50. And this one had what looked like a staple or some kind of damage to the top of the blister. So even despite all that damage, and it looks like there was a staple there originally at some point, even despite all that damage, that sold for $246.50. So that's a big number. I think I had a CAS 85 for this particular card back character combination. And I want to say I sold it for like $450 or so. And it sold immediately. It was like immediately gone. So the Power Droid's another one that's pretty tricky to find on the Return of the Jedi card backs in good shape. Here's the Rockstar Chewbacca, the alternate image Rockstar Chewbacca 77 back A. That one was ungraded, but it looked to be in pretty good shape. And that one sold for $355. And this one I think was a really, really good deal. This was an AFA 85 Kenner Canada Chewbacca. So this was already graded AFA 85, obviously yellowed blister, but foreign card back. It looks like it was freshly graded, and you got that for $405. $405 is a really good deal, I feel like. You compare that. I know this one's got the alternate image, so you do have to pay a premium for that, but for only $50 more, you're getting a Kenner Canada version, and it's already graded AFA 85. So that was a really good deal. Next up, we've got FX7 on the Tri-Logo. This one did have a big tear or something on the top of the card back, as well as a litho damage by the logo. So that held the price back at $215. It's a shame because the blister itself was in very clean shape. Maybe not very clean, but pretty clean. It's got a ding there on the top. So, it's $215 is probably about market. In higher grade, you can easily double that, if not potentially triple that, but 2.5 times pretty comfortably in high grade. So $215 is a good price. Here was an AFA 85, unpunched, no price sticker EV99. And that one was a beauty. 80, 85, 90 were the subscores. So it had a 90 grade for the figure. Very, very nice. That one sold for $676. That's a really good deal for a very high grade Power of the Force Last 17 figure. I think that was a really good buy there. Next up, we've got an Imperial Dignitary, ungraded, but a very nice high grade example. That one sold for $225. That's a good bargain there. Just looking casually at the blister, it doesn't look like it has any cracks. I think this very easily gets an 80 or an 80 plus. So $225 was a bargain. And then finally, we've got from the Toy Scout also, this one was the Tig From, obviously on a pretty rough card back. Now look at the edge wear. It's got a ton of edge wear to it. It's got a tear or a bad crease by the hang tab. It's got a huge litho tear by the KB Toys price sticker. And it's still sold for $635. And we just documented one. I feel like that was an AFA 80. That might have sold at LCG auctions for like $660. So looking back at that one, that was already AFA high grade, AFA 80, versus this one, that LCG auctions sale, and that price included the buyer's premium. That was a really good deal for a higher grade example. This is like a very rough example. So you just never know what's going to happen in some of these auctions. I hope you enjoyed this look at recent sales for vintage mint on card action figures. Please leave me a like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll be back soon.